Hey, this is Donny Edwards, and you're in the green room with Aidan Keene.
Hey everybody, welcome back to In the Green Room with Aidan Keene. Today's a very special episode as we are honoring the 49th anniversary of the passing of Elvis Presley. And I'm joined today by one of the most beloved Elvis tribute artists in the entire industry, Mr. Donny Edwards. Donny, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
I wanted to have someone special on the show for this occasion, and you automatically came to mind because you are again, one of the ETAs that I've always looked up to since I was a young guy, so it's great to have you here.
Thank you, man. Thanks. Great to be here.
So we all have an Elvis origin story and our love for Elvis, and I would love to learn more about yours. So what got you into Elvis?
Uh, well, let's see. I was probably about 2.5 years old when he died. And I don't know if it's from just my parents reliving that moment. They liked Elvis, but they weren't like diehard Elvis fans. My mom was more into like Patsy Cline, Brenda Lee, at the time, Helen Reddy, 1970s. My dad was more into he listened to Brooke Benton and Sam Cooke and the Beach Boys, and he listened to a little bit of everything. And they both loved Elvis. It was mostly my aunts and uncles that were more into Elvis, especially my Aunt Sarah, my Aunt Judy, my Uncle Joe. And I just remember, it's weird. I can't, to me, I kind of remember it. Hearing my mom go, "Oh my God, Elvis died." And he even being at that age, and then my Uncle Joe started crying. I'd never seen a man cry before. And he was just, he had just graduated high school. And, he was 18, I think, about 18 or so. And so that was kind of my first memory. And then watching all the stuff afterwards, and especially the next couple of years. I remember, going to the grocery store and sitting in the front of the cart as a little kid and recognizing when Elvis was over on the overhead radio. And I remember hearing his voice and me grabbing my mom going, "Hey, is that Elvis?" And I think it was, in fact, I'm pretty sure it was "Don't Be Cruel" that they were playing. And my mom's like, "Oh yeah, how do you know that?" Like how did, like his voice and the way he looked, I could identify him from an early age from everybody else. So there was something that drew me to him. And then what was kind of cool was later on, I found out that my Uncle Ronnie, who married my oldest aunt, my dad's oldest sister, actually got drafted, I think at 59, and got sent to the same air base, or not air base, or whatever it is, barracks as Elvis. And he actually got to meet Elvis a couple of times, there, and said he was just the most down to earth guy you ever met. And, he didn't seem to have any sort of, like, "Oh, I'm better than everybody" or whatever. He was just down to earth, wanted to do what everybody else was doing, and just a really good guy.
I've heard that. I actually, at a couple of my shows, I've been approached by some guys that also served in Germany with Elvis, and they said that, he just, like you said, he just kind of fit in with everybody. And
Yeah.
whenever anybody would ask him to sing or to do a show or something, he'd really hesitate because he was there to do his duties, and that's what he wanted to do. So
Exactly. And you hear that in some of the interviews. There's a really great interview just before he gets shipped to Germany. Uh, I think it is. And he talks about that. Was it any worse or any better for him? And he says, "No, when they told me about him, I was doing everything else. They probably just like us." And I do love the one part where they said, "Did you get any nicknames?" He says, "Yes, quite a few," from the other guys. And it's a really great interview. I found, actually, it's online somewhere on YouTube, and I have it downloaded too. But I just think it shows you who Elvis was, and that had to be a hard time in his life because his mom just passed, which tomorrow is the anniversary.
mhm.
The August 14th is the anniversary of his mother's passing. She was only 46. He's, to me, it's 1958 had to be just one of the most incredibly hard years for him. Not just losing your mother, but also he just been the biggest star in the world, shot up like a rocket, man. And now all of a sudden you're being brought down to earth. You got to go do what every other regular average American guy's got to do. Yet you've got all this talent and things to prove and things to continue. And then to try to start that back again in 1960, man, that's a tough hill to climb, man. It really is when you look at that year.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people overlook who Elvis was as a person. And there's been, you know, a couple of instances where I really was able to see who he was as a person. One of them was my first trip to Graceland and just being there and seeing how he
Yeah.
lived. Graceland is not as magnificent as some may think in terms of, like fanciness, I guess. It's pretty simple,
Yeah,
like
it's not like a
really.
Beverly Hills mansion thing you're thinking of. No, it's a Southern colonial home,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and that's completely different than what you would think about like in California, so to say.
Right. And the second instance was sitting down with Larry Geller and learning more about Elvis's spiritual life and his personal life, and that really moved me because I had no idea how deep of a thinker he was and what he really was seeking in life. It was really a beautiful experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I love about Elvis, and I love talking to Larry. I could listen to him talk all day. He just has that presence, that voice, that storyteller, way about him. And I remember first time I met him, I think it was like 2004 or five, and we were all he was. It was at the Elvis Arama, and they had a guy use the space for an interview with him, and we all just sat there like for like 2 hours, just nonstop, just listening to him talk. And I think what also I get from that from Larry's side of things and kind of like in the movie The Searcher, which I think is a great movie about Elvis,
Mm.
a great documentary, is that Elvis always asks, why me? And that shows you his demeanor, his humble demeanor, that he achieved this greatness. He had this, he looked like a Greek god. He, sounded like nobody else. He could sing all these different styles of music. He walked into a room, you just felt his presence, they say, but he always kept asking, like, why me? You know? So I just said that says a lot about who he was to me.
Getting to talk with Larry, that was probably one of the greatest days of my life. And I had, that was the first time ever meeting someone who was close with Elvis. So I had a list of questions in front of me on a piece of paper here. And at 5 minutes in, I moved the piece of paper over and I just sat there and
Yeah.
listened for over an hour and I didn't say a word because I didn't have to. I
Yeah.
couldn't have added
Yeah.
anything to that anyways. It was amazing. So you get your start in the ETA world later in life. How did that come about?
Mhm. Well, I mean, I grew up a huge Elvis fan. I was one of those guys back in the 80s. 80s music's probably my favorite music after Elvis. But I love a lot of the stuff my parents listened to, 50s, 60s, 70s. Uh, but I was one of those kids in the 80s. I remember actually getting in an actual fight at school because this guy was like, "Oh, Bon Jovi's better than Elvis." And I was like, "Shut your mouth," you know. And I remember, I was just always Elvis was my guy. I was probably about um, 6 or 7 when This Is Elvis came out.
Mm.
And that came out, I think, around 81, the summer of 81. And that really kind of formed my view of Elvis and how much he achieved and how short of a life he had, but, really just all his greatness. It's still my favorite Elvis movie, honestly. Epic is probably close second because I just love Epic because it's Elvis. But that movie really, it kind of stuck with me. And then, right, when we got a VCR, when you have VCRs, my brother was a big Elvis fan, still is, and he bought Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. And we used to watch that nonstop, and just kind of take it all in. Me and my brother started collecting records. My brother would buy some, and then I would use my allowance. If I wasn't buying something Superman, I would go buy Elvis. And my first album I still remember was Elvis Live at the International from 1969. My second album was Elvis Pure Gold, and I still have those. And so ever since I was a kid, I grew up just a big Elvis fan. It wasn't till '96 I kind of thought about looking into Elvis six. Where I grew up, I didn't really see any Elvis tribute artists. My brother's best friend's dad was a country singer, but sometimes he'd dress a little bit up and he'd do a whole thing of Elvis because he actually had a really good voice. And he would sing Elvis songs at some of the bars he played as a tribute. A lot of guys were doing that back in the 80s, but it wasn't until '96 that I went to Elvis Week, my first Elvis Week, that I actually got to go there and spend time at Elvis Week because I had family in Memphis and out in Bartlett. And every time Elvis Week came around, we would always be there at the beginning of it, but we were always away from it because we were visiting family. So my parents were like, "Oh, no, no, we're not going down there. It's crazy to go down by Graceland right now. You don't want to go down there. It's, it's packed and the traffic is too much." And my dad was like, "No, no, we're here to see, my grandma and my aunts and uncles." And plus we'd have to rush back because down in Texas at the time, school would start up about that time. So I always felt like I got gypped from getting to see Elvis Week until 1996. I took me and a buddy of mine, we drove up and stayed with my uncle and we went to Elvis Week. And that was the first time I had a lot of people coming up to me and like, "Hey, you look a lot like Elvis. Where do you do Elvis?" I was like, "I don't do Elvis. Those guys are crazy, man." That's how I looked at it. Because most of the time when you saw Elvis guys on TV, especially back in the 80s and 90s, it was usually cheesy, unless it was someone like a Johnny Hara or a David Scott who played him in This Is Elvis. There was, and I never saw them other than in movies. So I'd never seen that until I went to Elvis Week. And I thought, okay, loved Elvis, but I almost kind of felt it as sacrilegious to do that, but it took me a little while. And then probably around 2001, 2002, I started playing around karaoke. That was real big back then. And my sister was in a band. She was doing karaoke bars and stuff. And my dad always loved to sing. So my mom, and they used to do singing things on karaoke all the time. And it was actually, I was at my dad's. I was, living across town, and my dad was working a lot. So I'd go over and mow his yard for him because I knew he was working a lot of late shifts that he couldn't do it. So I'd go there, mow his yard, help clean up his house and everything. Then I'd go back to doing what I was doing. And so I'm over there and his karaoke machine's sitting there. And I'm like, It's like, and I saw he had a blank tape he hadn't even opened yet. So I opened it up, shoved it in there, hit record, just started. He didn't have any Elvis songs or not. If he did, I didn't know where they were. And I just started singing That's Right, Mama. Now I sang another song. I just wanted to see what I sound like. I played it back, listened to it, going, "Oh, it's not too bad." I always thought I might have a little bit of an Elvis sound. And so I, rewound the tape, shoved it in the cassette thing, popped it left, hoping he doesn't find it. Because I was real shy about anybody hearing me sing because I wasn't sure where I was with that. And like a week later, my dad's like, "Hey, were you messing with my karaoke machine?" I'm like, "Maybe." And he's like, "Was this you?" And I said, yeah, I just wanted to see what I sounded like. And he goes, "This is pretty good, son." He goes, "You got a really good Elvis sound on this." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Next thing you know, he's like, he's giving me his karaoke machine to practice. And I think he did it 'cause also he wanted a newer model. So he gave me his old one. So I just started playing around with it. And I really started focusing in the spring of 2002. I would go in and back then the internet was still kind of new. So it took like a day to download anything on dial up. And then I would get Elvis songs and I would go in. I mostly just kind of listened to Elvis's 50s, 60s stuff, and I would really go and play with that. And then that chance, that summer, August of 2002, there was a local theater that did live shows. And I went to see a few of the shows with country acts, and they did an Elvis tribute act. And I thought, And this one guy, the guy who ran it, says, he saw me in the audience. He comes over, he goes, "Man, you got a good young Elvis look. Do you sing?" I said, "No." I said, "No." I said, I play around with it, but I'm not getting in front of anybody. I don't even sing in front of my family, much less strangers.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. And he's like, "Hey, we got a contest coming up. You should really think about it." And I was already dyeing my hair black by then because I liked the way it looked on me, and because I had mostly kind of brownish hair. And one time I tried to go back to blonde, which I was as a kid, and I messed up my hair, so I dyed it black to cover it, and I just stuck with it. But yeah, so I did the contest. I won the contest. I Need You, I Love You. Second round, I did Hound Dog, and I got a big reaction. We got like 97% of the first place votes because you got to think, who do you think is first? Who do you think is second? And who's third? That's how they did it. And I had like 95% first place, and I won that one. And next year, there's another one in Lamar, Texas, at a racetrack. I won that one. And then everybody said, "Hey, you should go up to Ottawa up in Wisconsin. They do these big ones where it's $5,000 a day." And so I went up there. I didn't make the first day. I didn't even get up there in time. But the second day, I didn't do so well. By the third day, I finished, I just missed making the top to compete that night for the top four. And on the last day, I went to stuff I really loved, which was some of the movie stuff. Next thing you know, I'm in, and I ended up taking second overall. So that was pretty cool. So that kind of was getting my name out there, kind of, I'm still figuring this out, So that was kind of my first intro to all of it. Yeah.
Very good. And were you in the first Ultimate, Donny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2007. I tied for second with Trent Carlini.
Wow.
I got second 3 years in a row.
That's quite an accomplishment anyways. And while we're on it, I'd like to, and I won't talk about it too long, but I've only done one contest in my ETA career, and it wasn't for me. I'm not a competitive guy, so I don't see myself doing it again. But, in those contests, what do you, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that can be changed. In fact, I know there are a lot of things that can be changed about them. What do you think the judges miss? It seems like they focus so heavily on specific things. Do you think there's something that they miss in these contests that they should focus more on?
I think there's stage presence.
Hmm.
Usually the first thing you look at, okay, how does he have any similarities to Elvis physically? That should be the first thing you notice. And the second thing, mannerism and movements. And I see a lot of guys nowadays, the mannerism and movements are not correct. They're kind of copying each other,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, I hate to say this, but a lot of them kind of do the Fonzie, look and sound, they kind of do the, hey, type thing. And it's kind of gotten away from Elvis. And then it's usually the voice. And a lot of guys, they can mimic certain sounds of Elvis's voice at certain points, but there's so much nuance to Elvis's voice, his low tone, his soft tone, his mid range, which is really kind of where his main thing was, as well as his power. And then usually when most guys go to hit the power notes, they'll sound similar, but they're not. Usually they kind of cheat it a little bit. And the thing is, there's so many versions of Elvis, especially the live performances. They go, well, this is the one I can do, so that's what I'm going to do. Whereas I'm the opposite. After I focused on just my shows, I kept saying, okay, what's my favorite version of this song? What is the one that every time I listen to it gives me goosebumps? That's the version I want to hit. And I would keep playing with it and keep doing it until I got to that point that I could mimic it as much as I could. So contests are they're a funny thing. I've seen guys, busing, people like 2 or 3 bus loads. I remember seeing that Isle Capri one year. Some guys just, brought in like 200 or 300 people. So the audience was quiet while you're singing. But as soon as he walks out, he could walk out there, stumble, fall off the stage, and they're going to go nuts, and the judges are going to see that. Luckily when I won the Isle Capri back in 2006, I think there was 20 or 25 of us. And, I had to go first. I wasn't there for the drawing to see what you go because I was driving from Milwaukee down there in the middle of the night to try to hurry up and get down there. And I got down there just like the evening before the contest, and you had 10 minutes. And I said, so what place am I going? They said, you get to go first. I'm like, oh, I'm screwed, because you never want to go first because then they're going to rate you low. And then every guy after that, they get a little bit more impressed with. But what happened for me was I came out, I was just doing 50s. I came out to That Sorry Mama, Don't Be Cruel, It's Now or Never, and ripped into Jailhouse. And I actually ripped into the outfit. And one of Elvis's cousins was one of the judges. And another one was a guy that he had went to school with. And they both, I guess after I came out, that's the Elvis they loved, was the 50s Elvis. And they loved what I did, so that when I walked off the stage, Elvis's cousin, I guess, looked at the others and goes, that's the guy. He gave me a perfect score, which I found out later, they all gave me a perfect score. And then he just got up and left. So I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know that till after it happened. I won and everything. And then someone came up and told me, yeah, his cousin was like, no, that's the guy from the minute. He didn't even hardly watch the other guys. I said, oh, wow. They said he was still blown away by what you did. And I was like, oh, that's a cool moment. So, but contests could be very, it's sadly, sometimes it can be political, and I've seen it, in many contests. I've seen guys come out and just rock the crowd, and you're like, oh, he's got it, and next thing you know, they're like third or maybe second if they're lucky. And you're just looking around going, what else was everybody watching? This dude was in the zone, man. And, it is what it is sometimes. It's sadly, I do think politics plays a part of it. It's not always the guy that looks the most or sounds the most or acts the most like Elvis. You know, I mean, every guy has their uh, thing that they do really well, and some guys have the same similar attributes. Also, I think it comes down to the luck of the draw of the songs. You know, I know sometimes they don't want any repeats. So if you, let's say you're amazing at how great thou art, but your buddy over here gets it, then you've got to now find something else. It's like, no, 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 let them both do the same song. Let's see who's better at it.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like a boxer to me. If a boxer has a great, you know, like a Mike Tyson, you know, coming up underneath, he's got the same style, which is almost like that of Joe Frazier. You know, why not just see who's the better at it? You know, just let it go. And I know, like, I think in the Ultimate for a long time, I don't think they can still do it yet. Is like, you can't do American Trilogy.
No.
Because they consider it a medley. I'm like, but it's not a medley.
Right.
It's technically not a medley. Yes, it's 3 songs put together, but it's own song. It's not like Jailhouse Rock, Don't Be Cruel, Teddy Bear, Don't Be Cruel, or the Memphis Medley. It's completely different. But sometimes I've seen guys who completely deserved it, and they were like, yes, okay, that was the right guy. But sometimes it's like, I don't know. Looks like something's going on.
Exactly. Yeah, the rules are funny. Like, I competed at the Empire State Festival last year for Images of the King, and I was reading through the rules. You can't do trilogy. You can't do any medleys. You can't. 70s guys can't wear sunglasses in their set or during their song. There's a few other ones too. It's just kind of interesting, but
Which, you know, I get the sunglass thing a little bit, but Elvis did go on stage. There's video and pictures of him in the Chinese Dragon in 74 walking out in it.
yeah,
You know, because he had to. I always tell people, I said, the reason why Elvis wore the glasses is he had glaucoma. You know, he had to. You know, and I understand some guys do it because it kind of covers up the certain look. Maybe their eyes are different. Maybe they're cross-eyed. I don't know.
Mm.
But, you know, I kind of get it, you know, because I hate wearing the glasses. I've been asked to for like corporate events or stuff like that, but I rarely do. So,
yeah. Well, at the time of our recording, before we move on from contests, we actually just had the Ultimate wrap-up, and we now have the youngest reigning Ultimate champion, Finley Watkins, which is really cool that someone so
Yep.
young and first time.
known Finley a long time. Yep, I've known him a long time. He's a good kid. I didn't know he was doing 70s. So I saw the video. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was doing 70s. I've always saw him as you know, like the younger year stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of unique to see, you know. So yeah, that was good. I'm happy for him. He's a good kid. His mom's real sweet, really nice people.
It's pretty awesome. He's gonna do well. I know that.
Oh
So
yeah.
one thing that I noticed that sets you apart from a lot of the others is there's a couple of others that have gotten to do this, but you've gotten to work with people who actually knew and worked alongside Elvis, which is awesome. You know, notably the Sweet Inspirations and DJ Fontana, who I know you were on the road with for a bit, and I'm sure there's a lot of DJ stories. But, you know, how did those experiences change the way you understood, you know, Elvis and how you go about performing as Elvis?
Well, I never try to talk too much or ask too many questions, even though my brain was always like, "Oh, I need to find out about this, find out about that," to try to get more insight. I probably learned quite a bit from Charlie, getting to meet Charlie back in. I met him originally in 2003, got to know him pretty well in 2004 when he was out here in Vegas for a festival. We ended up just clicking and hanging out for several days. And same thing with Joe Esposito. I got to know Joe pretty well, and we did some shows together up in Canada, and got to ask a few questions there. You know, it was just me and him. And DJ would tell some stories sometimes, you know, when you're on the road with him. And I think one of the funniest stories is how early on, when Elvis and them would have to drive around his pink Cadillac from town to town, they'd do a show and then they'd have to drive 7 or 8 hours just to make the next one. And they'd have to take turns driving. Well, they don't have time to stop and take a shower, get cleaned up. You know, they're going up there, they're only doing a few songs, you know, doing a full show, like, you know, later on. But Elvis apparently had a habit of, they had a rule you couldn't kick off your shoes, you know, because your feet would usually stink from sweating. But Elvis would always kick off his shoes. And, you know, he's got usually Lanskis or something similar from there in Memphis, and they'd take his shoes and they'd throw them out the window. And Elvis would wake up and he's looking around like, you know, he's cussing them out. And as soon as they go to the next town, they'd have to pull into a station and find somewhere that sold shoes, and you have to go buy a new pair of shoes. And I always thought, you know, I wonder I said, how many pairs would you guess? He goes, oh, at least a dozen. We did that too with Elvis. I'm like, there's probably a dozen old shoes sitting out there on the side of the road for years. No one knew was Elvis's. And now if you could find them, it'd be worth millions.
That's awesome.
I always thought that was amazing. Yeah. But yeah, I've been lucky enough. I got to work with the Sweets. In fact, I just got to see a stale a couple of weeks ago over at Westgate. And it was so good to see her. I was in there probably about 10, 11 years. And, it was a good time to visit with her. And, I got to do a lot of shows with her and Myrna, the two of the originals, as well as Portia Griffin. And, and then, DJ, we probably did, I went back and looked after he passed away. I went back and looked up how many shows we did. We did about 101 shows together, which is quite a few. I didn't realize we did that many. From traveling the Midwest to traveling to other countries, doing shows down in Texas with me. I really miss DJ. I miss DJ. I miss Karen, and DJ was just every so often I would do my DJ in front of him, my impersonation of him. And he'd always say something like, "Hey, is that supposed to be me?" He go, "Stick the elbow, boy." He would all. And when I always thought, when I think of DJ, I always think of what do they call those things? Zingers, vanilla zingers. He loved those vanilla zingers. That was his thing. That and Taco Bell. That was his two that I remember always. Hey, there's Taco Bell. Like I get DJ something to eat or zingers. Karen run in and buy him. I was like, and man, I said, I hope I get to a point I have to worry about I can eat whatever I want. So, but he was a great guy. DJ really was. And then, I got to work, I got to do a couple of shows with Millie Kirkham. I got to work with Gordon Stoker and Ray Walker. Ray's, he's 93 now, still down in Nashville. And Gordon was a great help to me one time early on in my career. Potawatomi. I was still trying to learn how to do this correctly. And I decided I was going to do Peace in the Valley. And I was really nervous. And when I'm nervous, I kind of pace and I'm fidgety. And he saw me and he goes, "Come here." He goes, "Take a breath." He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing Peace in the Valley." And, he goes, "Okay." And he kind of walked me through how Elvis would do it. And it really kind of calmed my demeanor. And I'm thinking to myself, no, just focus on what you're going to do. And then I was like, no, I need to listen to this guy. He was there. And I just kind of listened to him and I went out and I ended up winning, that night. And that night, if you won, you got to sing with the Jordanaires. So I'm getting to sing with the Jordanaires. Like, what song do you want to do? And I'm like, the only song that popped in my head was Don't, because I love that song because they had such the Jordanaires. And I probably should have chose something else because it hit me that I'm singing with the Jordanaires and I just start bawling halfway through it. And I still remember Gordon and Ray looking at me like, "What is wrong with you? What's wrong with this kid? Why is he crying?" Who cried? It's almost like there's no crying in baseball. But I was so caught up in the moment, that I just won. But now I'm also singing with the Jordanaires. It really hit me. I thought that was a dream come true. I'd only been like a year, I think that was like year 1 or 2 of my career. So that was a cool moment. A couple of years later, I get to tour with them, which was a cool thing. But yeah, I've gotten to work around a lot of guys, including like Bob Moore, who was Elvis's bass player in the 60s on the sessions, the movie stuff. And he did Fever, the bass line for Fever. I got to sing that with him and have him play for me when I did the show and Mark with him. I feel like I got in just the nick of time to work with the people in Gordon and DJ and Myrna. Now we've lost Joe and Charlie and all these guys. So the fact that I've gotten to do that, that's where sometimes I'm kind of envious of the Elvis tribute artists who were there about the time Elvis passed away. I mean, it became there early on, who just really, got to craft their art and be with those guys continuously. It's just, it's pretty cool, man. It's a great moment when you get to have that.
I bet. And you've mentioned, playing at the Westgate and everything. Do you have a favorite venue that you've played? Is that it?
Oh man. Yeah, it's definitely up there. I mean, anytime you walk in that building, all you have is flashes, all this footage you've seen. Some of the 72 stuff, concerts that are out there online in 71. I've got a book, Elvis in Vegas, and there's a great website, elvisinconcert.com, that you can go look at every show and see what he's saying just about what they had records of and what costume he wore, what the guys were wearing. Sometimes if he deviated a version of a song, he tells you all that. And it's just so cool when you walk in there, you kind of feel it still. There's just the history. It's kind of like when I played the Municipal in Shreveport. Where Elvis kind of met DJ was at that place. And, you just feel the history there, and anytime you get to play a venue that Elvis played, it makes you kind of raise your game. Like, no, okay, this is how I got to do this. And to me, it's like game 7. You've got to bring your A game, and that's how I've always felt. The Municipal's one of them. Westgate's definitely I'd say probably second after playing at Graceland. I got to play on part of the property that Elvis owned during his lifetime. And that was, still probably the biggest achievement I've had, really.
And to this day, you're the only ETA to do that, right?
Yep. Yeah, to my knowledge, that's what they told me. And I got a thing from the mayor and a thing from the governor to, proclamate me as the only one. And the first, to the best of my knowledge, I still am. But to be able to say that you played on something Elvis owned, anything that Elvis owned, whether it be put on one of his jumpsuits, playing a guitar, but knowing that he owned this part of this, and you get to play somewhere that he no other person has got to. So that's pretty. It's still to today when I look back, it was such a crazy day because I played the night before in Lubbock, Texas, and I had to drive all the way to Lubbock a couple of days before. Got in, had to slept a couple of hours, went and did a morning show, went back, slept 6 hours, got up, went and did the show, and then hightailed it back to Memphis. Slept 3 hours, then got ready, and then hightailed it down to Graceland, and then had to go through this back entrance and sign all these papers and all this stuff, and go in and do a sound check and do everything. And then I remember still as I was heading into the property, which is this pretty good sized building. I think it's still there. It had just rained, and there was this beautiful rainbow over Graceland. So I ended up taking my camera out and taking a picture like, okay, that's like a sign or something. I don't know what that is, but it was just so cool, and then I went out there and, it was a private function. But it was so cool to get to do that. And then, knowing that my mom was there and my wife was there with me, and yeah, it was just one of the coolest things, man. It really was.
That's awesome. I haven't gotten to play a lot of the big venues yet. I mean, I did the Turning Stone Casino in New York for that contest, and I'm still on a local level, so I do a lot of nursing homes and senior centers and function halls. Moving into ballrooms now. We did a show a couple months ago, and we had about 300 people there, sold out. But the coolest so far has been a venue that you actually played, the Regent Theater in Arlington, Massachusetts. I just did a show there with Doug Church last month, and it's funny. You walk in the door, and I've been going there all my life, but I got to go in early before anyone else got there, and I'm just looking at all the people that have played there, front and center. You're right there on the wall, still to this day.
Oh, really? Oh,
You are the
funny.
first poster that's right on that eye level. It's you and Sean, and it's from like 2007, I think, something like that. But
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think we started it around 06. I might be wrong, but I thought it was 06
it
we
might have
first
been.
played there. I remember one year we went there, and Rick, I'm a big Celtics fan, so I fit in on that. But the Yankees are my team. I grew up. I was born up in Iowa, but I was raised in Texas. And for whatever reason, I fell in love with the Yankees. I love the story of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and all the history behind the Yankees, Yogi Berra, Mickey Mantle, all those guys. And I fell in love with it. And the Yankees were playing a 5-game series in Boston that weekend. We were playing, and they actually swept Boston on their home and on their home field. And I still remember Rick talking about not bringing me and Sean back because we were Yankee fans, and I cursed him.
Oh man.
I was like, hey, you guys just, we probably ain't going to get another championship for a while, but we did get 2009, but we ain't won anything since. But
Well, I don't think it was too much of a curse. We don't always have it going on, but we did win today though. We broke the 4 or 5 day losing streak today, and now we're back at 1. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
But we had a great time there at the Region. I used to play. I do a show once a year with Sean. We do a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights, I think, and then also I would also come back in December and do my own show. So we'd always do a show there for a week, and I would work with the Velvet Elvis Band.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
those guys. Yeah, and then the last time I think I was there was like 2000. I want to say 2008, summer of 2008. I had worked with the Fever Band, which I had just started working with the year before in 2007. And next year will mark 20 years that we've been working together now pretty consistently.
Yeah, that was a dream. That was a dream come true for me to play there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually just saw Rick. Where did we see him? I think it was January. I think it was January. He came out. He was out in California and he reached out and said, "Hey, I'm going to be up in Vegas for a couple of days. I'd love to come see your show." And he stopped by. And he, so complimentary and everything. So, it would be fun to get back up there somehow. To get back.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Because I love that area.
That's awesome. We'd love to have you up here, that's for sure. So before we wrap up, I'd love to hear more about your show because I know you're constantly working out there in Vegas. So, what are you doing currently out there?
Well, right now we're actually getting prepared to do our Vegas shows September 8th, 9th, and 10th at South Point. I've been at South Point for over 11 years, and we've sold out all of our shows there. The only other place I played locally was Westgate back in 2017 for the 40th anniversary. The vice president of entertainments had heard about me through a guy who knew Elvis, who worked at the Westgate. I'd played a few private corporate gigs up in Elvis's suite, and he was like, "Man," he goes, a lot of it, Elvis, and he came to some of my show and loved it, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to recommend you." Get the guy comes to the show, and he loved it. This was probably mid-June. And he's like, "Hey, we don't have a lot of time, but would you want to play Elvis's stage for 2 nights for the 40th anniversary? We have an opening August 11th and 12th. I'm like, "That's not even 8 weeks away, man." I'm like, "Yeah, but yeah, whatever you want me to do." I said, "Yeah, of course we'll do it." And, so we worked it out, and the stage was still set up and should at the time, because they didn't want to change too much, but we made it work. And I did probably about almost a 2-hour show. Did a lot of 50s, 60s, took a short intermission, or actually we had the band play some of Elvis's gospel, and then we had the ladies sing Sweet Inspirations in between. And then I came out and did the 70s. One night I wore the white pinwheel, which I've just gotten. The next night I wore the Aloha. And it was just, man, it was one of those great nights to be up on that stage, man. It was such a blast. But yeah, we're about to do South Point coming up. And then I'm playing a festival, like a blues festival, a few days later here in Vegas. We've had to do some new stuff for this documentary that I'm in about Elvis, where I recreate some scenes as Elvis. We had a guy who looks like the Colonel. We had a girl who looks like Priscilla. Had a guy look like Joe and Charlie. And we got to do a lot of shooting a couple of years ago, and we just had to do some reshoots. And it should be coming out pretty soon on Angel Studios. And it's called Shadow of the King, but it's all my singing. We went in and recorded everything, and it was funny because some of the music was a little different than Elvis's. When you hear How Great Thou Art, that was probably the hardest version I've ever done, because it doesn't sound anything. There's no JD type sound in the back in the stamps. It doesn't have that. Oh, it doesn't have any of that. It sounds like spa music when you get a massage. And it's just so different. I had to, learn the timing of it differently. And then the last note, you have to hold forever, and try to still hit it and sound like Elvis. And man, it was probably one of the toughest things I've ever done. I think more than following it and getting your timing right while still trying to maintain that Elvis sound. And I'm real happy with it. I'm very proud of what we did. We got to see a preview of it not long ago of what they have so far. And it looks really good. It's got all these great interviews of people who knew Elvis: Estelle Brown, Sandy Miller. The last interview with Charlie Pride is on there, will be on there. And which is cool because I worked a lot with his son, Dion. He used to be my guitar player for a long time. It's stories about Elvis behind the scenes, at shows, at rehearsals, on tour, but how he always maintained his belief that God gave him this gift and his relationship with God. So it's really a good spiritual thing.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. Hopefully, it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. We actually shot a lot of the footage we shot was on Johnny Cash's farm outside Nashville, and that was really cool. I got to know Johnny's cousins, and they would tell stories about how June still had love letters from Elvis of when they used to write back and forth early in like 55, 56, and then Elvis became huge, and Johnny one night got so mad or so jealous or something that he took some of the letters and threw them out in the lake. He got so, because he was like, He was because he just loved June, but he couldn't stand the idea that she ever, obviously she was married, when he met her, but appreciated Elvis. But I think he was definitely jealous. Is what I understood.
That's
Of
funny.
course, everybody was back then. Yeah, I mean, nobody looked and sounded like that, and we're still trying to figure it out.
That's true. I think that's what makes him so unique and so special. I mean, there's a mystery to him that we still haven't figured out yet.
I was talking to some friends of ours, Joan and Paul Gansky, down in California one time, and some of the pictures that he took of when the Hilton was being built, or the International back then. They went out to Vegas and took pictures. Okay, this is where Elvis is going to be in about a year. And then they were there, I think, opening night, or several of those nights they were there in '69 when he first played. And they said they went back so many times. They said, it's funny, you would go into the building and there was this excitement, this feeling that they said no other entertainer they've ever had. They said you could almost feel his presence in the building that big. They said it's crazy to think about, but he had that. And I've heard other people say that you wouldn't even see Elvis walk into a room. You would feel something change. Like you could feel the atmosphere change. And I've only heard that about a couple of other people. I've heard people say that similar about John Wayne was a little bit like that. He had this presence about him. And some people say a little bit with Michael Jackson a little bit. But Elvis had it on another level, it seemed like, that even people I think Michael tried to emulate him in many ways, and John Wayne appreciated it, that he even went to Elvis's funeral. A lot of people don't know. It says a lot about Elvis. I mean, he just had something different about him. He really did.
That's for sure. And 49 years after his passing, his legacy is still stronger than ever. I think that's amazing, and I look
Yeah.
forward as an ETA to continue carrying that on because I think we have the best job in the world, honestly, and
Oh yeah.
it's a lot
What
of
I always tell
fun.
a lot of young ETA is stay true to Elvis.
Yeah,
Don't watch other tribute artists, and unless you feel like, okay, that guy's doing what Elvis did. Okay, and I always say, if you're a '50s Elvis, it's the hardest era to do, because we don't really, even though we've got the 4 movies and we've got some TV footage, you don't really have a lot of concert footage.
right.
I think there's something that just came out from Minnesota recently in '50s. I think it's May of '56. It's right after he bombed in Vegas. He's wearing the green jacket. I don't think he's wearing a tie though. It looks weird. But you see him come out to Heartbreak. You see him, he's not even doing Hound Dog yet.
Right.
And he's moving like crazy on blue suede shoes. But it's so weird to watch because it's really just a few songs. And you realize Elvis in the '50s, at the most, he did like 10 songs, maybe. But the average was like 7 or 8 songs, and boom, he's off, because they had all these other opening acts. They had like 10 acts, and then he would be the closer at one point. But it's the hardest era, in my opinion, because of the lack of footage, and the lack of knowledge that we really have of Elvis. I always tell people, yeah, but you can kind of get an idea of what he was doing. Like when I do like Hard Headed Woman, which we don't have footage of, to me, I try to stay in that King Creole style,
Yeah.
trouble stop. That's okay. This is that era. This is this little block. He's moving differently. He's looking different than he is, and he's singing different. Like it's kind of like the '60s. The '68, we have a lot of footage of, but it's completely different than anything in the movies. Completely different, So you have to kind of focus on what he did actually there. So yeah.
Absolutely. And like you said, I mean, he didn't do a whole lot in the 50s live, so you know, the 50s guys that do the tribute to the 50s, their sets would be really short if they didn't think outside the box a little bit.
Yep. Yep. In my show, I usually do about 7 or 8 50 songs. Then I do about 3 or 4 movie stuff or 60 stuff. And then I jump into the '70s, which I usually do at least 15, 16 songs. On average, I do probably around 28 to 32 songs on my show every night,
Yeah.
depending on time limit. Because here in Vegas, when it hits you have 90 minutes and they want you off that stage. And it's funny because I never realized that as much. And then you hear Elvis talk about it on some of the audio from the Hilton. He goes, yeah, they want me off the stage in 5 minutes. I don't care. He's just going to do what he does. Cause he goes, they want you out there gambling and making money and buying stuff. You have to obey the rules to a point, but they usually let me get away with a couple of minutes.
That's funny. One of my favorite gifts that I ever got, my girlfriend last year on Christmas got me the Having Fun with Elvis on Stage record, which there's no music
Oh
on
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It's just him doing his thing. And
Just being goofy.
I like
Yeah.
to include a lot of that in my show too, because the diehard fans, they'll know what I'm talking about, and other people
Yep.
won't.
Yep.
But authenticity is
I
key.
think he would introduce himself. I always love when he always introduced himself as somebody different. Like he would say, "Oh, good evening, ladies. My name's Fats Domino, or I'm Bill Cosby, or I'm Engelbert Humperdinck, or I'm Wayne Newton." He was always doing goofy things like that, and he had like a list of like this, like 10 people he would introduce himself of.
Yep. Well, Donnie, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure learning more about you and celebrating Elvis's legacy and getting to speak with you tonight. It's been great.
Hey, it's been a blast, man. It's good to catch up with you, man.
And for everyone listening, be sure to check out Donnie on Facebook. I know there's the Donny Edwards Live on Facebook, and you
Yeah,
have a website too, correct?
we do, but it's kind of been reconstructed for the last couple of years. So it's running, but it's not up to date. You know,
So stick to Facebook.
and that's just Donnie Edwards. Yeah, just stick to Facebook right now. Yeah,
All
so
right.
we get, hopefully in the next couple of months we can get it going.
Sounds good. Well, thank you to everybody listening, and thank you to you, Donnie, for joining me once again. And until next time, may God bless you, and we'll see you again soon.